It's time for a new project. So today I'm going to build this study desk. I wanted a design that used both steel and timber, so I sketched up a bit of an idea and then took it from there. I'll use this drawing as a guide to the build. I've got some 50mm RHS that's got a 2mm thick wall, some angle and some flat bar of a couple of different sizes. I've got a pile of pine planks for the tabletop, and I've cut a couple of templates so that I can draw the angles on the steel. There are only two different angles for the steel. I actually have a cut-off saw, but unfortunately it will only cut up to 45 degrees, and these steep angles will have to be done with the angle grinder. This introduces a bit more faffing around and the ability to make more mistakes. I want to achieve a raw steel industrial type look for the legs, and I tried the flap disc and some wire wheels and nothing got this blue paint off. Then I found that some mineral terps and some steel wool soaked gets it off reasonably well. With most of the paint taken off, I can then use the flap disc to just get the last of the mill scale off to make it nice and bright. So now that that's done, you can see I've got a nice shiny surface, but it's roughed up and uneven looking, and I want it to be like that. So here are all the bits, all cut out and all cleaned up, ready for welding. With all the angles cut, it's a fairly simple matter of just clamping it down so that the pieces are nice and tight together, and then tacking it and welding it together. It's important to get both legs the same, obviously, so I take a bit of effort to make sure that both legs are the same. Because I'm a backyard hobbyist, my welds aren't the prettiest looking, but they're functional. It's always tempting to dress them with the angle grinder, but I want this industrial look, so I'm leaving the raw weld and even the heat marks from the welder. Again, there's more faffing around to make sure that everything's in the right place before I tack it together. I'm nowhere near a competent welder, but I still enjoy this stuff, and once it's tacked, I enjoy just being able to run a nice line of weld. Some boys with small willies buy V8s to make themselves feel more powerful. I like to weld steel. It makes me feel very powerful and important. And I'm getting there, and here's a bit of a look at one of the finished products. I like that weld heat mark around the weld. Here's the basic structure of both legs finished. Now it's time for the woodworking part of the exercise. I've just bought some pine planks that I've put through the thicknesser so that they've got a nice surface, and now I've glued them together. I've just realised that I made the legs too short, so I've put some little extensions on top. And I've got some flat bar on top of that. This will bolt underneath the tabletop in 3 places. The timber's dry enough to start using now, so it's time for the orbital sander to put a nice smooth finish on the top of the table. Because these are just glued planks for the tabletop, I'm making sure that I have everything clamped together. So underneath, in the middle, I've got a brace that's screwed on every one of the planks to keep it together nice and firm. With the tabletop sanded down, I can now start the finishing process. I'm using shellac to both colour the timber a darker colour and also seal it a bit, so when I use the spray can it doesn't soak in as much. After a couple of coats of shellac, I can actually fit the legs. So I've got a piece of angle with the 3 holes in the top, and then the bolt will go through and bolt to the legs. I'm drilling through this piece of timber to make sure I keep the drill nice and straight so everything lines up. Now the test. Does everything line up? And yes, it does. Surprising and amazing. It's surprising how that taking a bit of extra effort to pay attention to detail really pays off in the end. Okay, I say to myself, things are progressing nicely. I've got the legs bolted to the tabletop. Everything looked pretty nice. I've got some stainless bolts, round-headed, nice and neat, and I've got dome nuts underneath, so there's no thread hanging out. Now let's test it out with an office chair. Ooh, it's nice and stable as well. And I'm also surprised to find that the table is level as well. Look at that, the bubble's right in the middle. Well, what about sideways? Let's check that as well. And a bit hard to see, but trust me, that's in the middle as well. Things were going well until I realised that the zigzag on the back of the table actually extends out further than the table, so that would end up hitting a wall if you put it right up against a wall. So it's time to modify the design by cutting off that pointy bit and welding a flat onto it instead. Oh well, at least I realised it now rather than when I'd finally finished it all, and put a divot in the wall when I was fitting it. I've still got some flat bar left over, so it's just a simple matter of measuring it up, marking, cutting, and then welding. After all, this project's about having fun with steel and wood, so I end up having more fun than I expected. I found it very awkward welding in this position, but it was the best I could get. So I struggled on and was able to get the job done in the end. And this is what it looks like now. It looks like it was designed that way, don't you reckon? Well, that's my story anyway. I shouldn't be, but I'm constantly surprised at how much stuff ends up being cluttered all over the workshop during a project. There's just stuff everywhere. Goodness knows what I used all of it for. Anyway, it's time to do the final finish. I've got some clear satin that I'm spraying on both the tabletop and the steel. This will give a good work surface to the tabletop and also preserve the steel to be nice and shiny and keep all those heat weld marks on it to give that industrial look. And here it is set up. A computer table for the person who has everything and wants something just a little bit different. That's right, it's not my normal practice, but this table's going on Gumtree. I made it as a project, but now it's time to recover the costs. I'm happy with how it turned out, and therefore I'm happy to sell it.